And welcome back to Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and I make a lot of commander decks, as you can probably imagine. On top of all the decks that I make for my channel, all the decks I make for my patrons, and all the decks I make for myself, I still got a whole lot of leftovers, and this video will be the leftovers. But one man's trash is another man's treasure, as they say. Not that any of these decks are trash. They're actually pretty good decks, but just ideas I came up with, threw the decks together, and now they can possibly be yours if you're at all interested. Let's get started. I'm going to start out with Kylox Visionary Inventor, and honestly, there's not much to this one. This is very much a Method 2 deck where I had an idea that I wanted to do. In fact, it's almost a secret commander deck, really. But, you know, it doesn't have to be. Basically, I wanted to make a deck around Dracoplasm. I love this card, and funny enough, two of the decks that I'll be talking about here have this card in it. I wanted to make a deck where Dracoplasm will work. I mean, this is just such a unique card, and especially in the colors, right? So blue and a red shapeshifter 0/0 with flying. As it enters the battlefield, sacrifice any number of creatures. Dracoplasm's power becomes the total power of those creatures, and toughness becomes their total toughness, and it has that fire-breathing ability. I've always loved this card. I always thought it was especially neat in the colors it is in, right? And of course, what's the commander deck where this fits? There's probably not a lot. So I made a deck where I thought it could fit nicely, and then of course, because it's a Method 2 deck, I found the commander afterwards, and of course, Kylox is, you know, fits the theme of I want to be sacrificing my creatures, right? That's why it works. So this guy is 5 blue and a red. Viashino Artificer, although I think it's not a Viashino anymore. 4/4 Menace, Ward 2 Haste. When it attacks, sacrifice any number of other creatures, then exile the top X cards of your library, where X is their total power. You may cast any number of instant or sorcery spells from among the exiled cards without paying their mana cost. So again, it's doing the same thing that Dracoplasm is doing with the sacrificing, and cares about power toughness. So I actually thought it was a great fit there. And if you have a Kylox deck, it's likely that Dracoplasm is a good fit in your deck. This commander is pretty unusual, actually, right? Because, of course, even though you're doing the instant sorcery thing, which, you know, nothing new there in Izzet colors, sacrificing creatures, that is pretty unusual. And so you got to figure out some interesting ways to do it. And I think the best way is with instants and sorceries, right? It's like Elemental Appeal, red, sorcery, create a 7/1 red elemental token creature with trample and haste. Exile it at the beginning of an end step. If this spell was kicked, that creature gets +7/+0 until end of turn. So if it's kicked, it's going to be a 14/1. But of course, that's going to run you, 9 mana? That's a lot. And again, this card works. I mean, it's a sorcery that's creating creatures, so it does work with our commander. And, you know, a 7-power creature, but possibly also a 14-power creature. And your commander is looking for total power, right? So that works there, and obviously it kind of works with the Dracoplasm as well. You'll have a flying 14/1 creature. You know, it dies easily, but attack the guy who doesn't have a Thopter token in play, right? Stone Idol Trap is another one. 5 and a red, instant trap. The spell costs 1 less to cast for each attacking creature. Create a 6/12 colorless construct artifact creature token trample, exile at the beginning of the next end step. So there's lots of effects like that. Lots of the exile at the beginning of the next end step. And of course, because they're instants and sorceries, it fits with our commander as well. It fits with the Dracoplasm. It fits with all of that, right? Hate Mirage, 3 and a red sorcery. Choose up to 2 target creatures you don't control. For each of those creatures, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Those tokens gain haste, exile them at the beginning of the end step. So of course, you can be attacking with all of these tokens if you want. Doing whatever you want with them, but then before they go away on the end step, like maybe on the second main phase, we'll sacrifice them to the Dracoplasm, or obviously in combat, we can sacrifice them to our commander. Either way, it works. So, you know, essentially this is just a Kylox deck. I just maybe, you know, and if you had a Kylox deck, you could just take some of the ideas I had here. I tweaked it a little just to fit the Dracoplasm in. And I guess if you had a Kylox deck, you probably likely could also fit the Dracoplasm in as well. So give that a shot. Let's talk about the other deck that I have Dracoplasm in. And man, I make so many Izzet decks and I never keep any of them, as I've talked about in the past. And this is another one. This is a partner deck. Ludwig Necro Alchemist is the part that makes it is it, but this is just, sort of generic card draw because we're going to be getting in for damage every turn. The actual commander that we're building around here is Ghost of Ramirez Di Pietro, which is just one of my favorite commanders. I've built so many Ghost decks, maybe the commander I've built around the most. It's funny how when this guy first came out, it seemed very underwhelming and silly, and I didn't think much of it because of the way they worded the card. But the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, man, there's so much you could do with that guy. So 2 and a blue spirit, pirate 2/3. Can't be blocked by creatures with toughness 3 or greater. So getting in for damage is super easy with this guy. I never have a problem there. Whenever Ghost of Ramirez Di Pietro deals combat damage to a player, choose up to 1 target card in a graveyard that was discarded or put there from a library this turn. Put that card into owner's hand. So the way they worded it makes it seem like maybe you want to be doing this with somebody else, but you don't. You just use it on yourself, right? This is just a way to get cards back out of your graveyard, and because it works with discarding, it works with self-milling, it works with so many different things. For that reason, there's a lot of different ways to build a ghost deck, and also for that reason, it works with so many different strategies. Again, if you could do a cycling deck with this guy, right? Say you just wanted to make a cycling deck, but you didn't want it, in Jeskai colors. You want to do it in different colors. You could use Ghost. He just works with so many strategies as a Method 2 commander as well. And in fact, became the commander of my Drelnu deck for that reason. I actually switched to Ghost and Armix as the commanders to that deck because Ghost I had him in the 99, but he just works so well with the self-mill that I ended up switching him as commander, and that's what we're doing here. We are doing self-mill. This is it self-mill strategy, and what I ended up doing here is, how I originally came onto this idea, I'm not sure. I just thought, okay, Ghost really likes self-milling. If I mill 20 cards into my graveyard on my, first main phase or whatever, then I attack with my Ghost. I'm basically looking at 20 cards. It's almost like look at the top 20 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. It's essentially the same thing, right? And if a card did that, that's really, really good. And of course, because we're in Is It colors, I thought, okay, what's the advantage we can take away from that, right? Because just I mill a bunch of cards and then pick one out is okay, but we want more advantage out of it. And of course, there's a whole bunch of cards in Is It colors that, again, what Is It do best? The instants and sorcery theme. So Huddy Jin, for example, 1 blue Jin, star 4, has flying, and its power and toughness is equal to the number of instants and sorcery cards in your graveyard. So of course, we're in the instant sorcery theme. We're milling, obviously we're casting instant sorceries, but we're also milling them. So this guy's going to have a huge power. Crackling Drake as well. Blue, red Drake. Star 4 again, funny enough, with flying. Its power and toughness is equal to the total number of instant sorcery cards you own in exile and in your graveyard. And when it's just the battlefield, you get to draw a card. So we're in the instant sorcery theme mostly here, but we're milling them into our graveyard and taking advantage of all the instant sorceries in our graveyard, right? Obviously, Octavia Living Thesis is going to be a slam dunk here because it costs 8 less to cast if we have 8 or more instant sorcery cards in our graveyard, which won't be hard to do. Immolating Gyre is fantastic here. 4 red sorcery. Immolating Gyre deals X damage to each creature and planeswalker you don't control, where X is the number of instant sorcery cards in your graveyard. Perfect fit here. This is a one-sided board wipe. I really like Curse of Unbinding here. This is a funny one that actually, after playtesting it in this deck, I've decided I'm going to put it in my Ghost and Armix deck. It's kind of a weird card that, again, just like Ghost, that when you first glance at it, you're like, okay, am I supposed to be using this on my opponents? 6 in a blue Aura Curse enchant player. At the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, that player reveals cards on the top of their library until they reveal a creature card. Put that card on the battlefield in your control. That player puts the rest of the revealed cards into their graveyard. So again, I think you're supposed to use this on yourself, but maybe use it on your opponents. I'm not sure. It does mill relatively well, but of course it also puts a creature into play, so I don't know if you want to be using that on your opponents. Here it's a double whammy for us because we want to be milled, but also it's cheating creatures into play, so it's win-win for us. Fantastic fit here. Of course, because we're milling ourselves so much, we have to be careful not to mill ourselves out. Psychic Spiral's a fantastic fit here. 4 in a blue instant. Shuffle all cards from your graveyard into your library. Target player mills that many cards. So you can, funny enough, what you can do here is you can shuffle all your stuff into your library and then mill yourself again if you want to. I don't know why you'd want to do that. I mean, there are reasons to do that, but here, not so much. And obviously, because we have so many milling effects here, we can mill our opponents. That isn't a sort of an alt win here with this deck. And what you can do is once you have like 70 cards in your graveyard, you want to shuffle in, but Added bonus, we can mill out one of our opponents as well, right? So this can be a little bit of a, not a win con, but knock one player out. And the funniest thing about this deck and why I ended up sort of putting it together in the first place is because one of the worst cards ever printed, Book Burning, is actually a fun fit here. I don't know if anyone has ever put this in a commander deck before. It's a really awful card, but does work here. So 1 in a red sorcery. Any player may have Book Burning deal 6 damage to them. If no one does, target player mills 6 cards. It is a red mill spell. It's so weird. It's like a color pie break, but it's also terrible because your opponent, of course, can just take the 6 damage. But of course, here we're using it on ourselves. Who's going to take 6 damage just so we don't mill ourselves, right? No one's going to do that. So it actually is a good fit here. This is 2 mana. I mill 6 cards because, again, no one's going to take the damage. Who would? And then I attack with my ghost and put one of those cards in my hand, right? So in this deck, this seemingly horrible card, again, I've had people reference this as one of the worst cards ever printed. In this deck, this is essentially 2 mana. Look at the top 6 cards of your library and put one into your hand, right? So pretty neat fit here. It's a really neat deck. Is it self-mill? Definitely don't see that very often. Am I obsessed with Ghost of Ramirez DiPietro? Possibly because I have another one here, and this time he is partnering with Francisco Foul Marauder because Ghost of Ramirez DiPietro is also a pirate. So we can do a little bit of a pirate theme here as well. Because Francisco says whenever one of our pirates you control deal damage to a player, Francisco explores. And of course, our ghost is a pirate that is going to be getting in for damage all the time. So that's why these guys work great together. However, they don't work as well together. And I don't know if people are doing this or not, but it doesn't work if you are. I mean, it is a good pairing, these two. However, the exploring does not work with Ghost's ability. I don't know if there are people out there who ran out and made this deck thinking that it does, because of course, Ghost's ability is a damage trigger and Francisco's ability is a damage trigger. And what ends up happening, like the timing doesn't work because whenever you put an ability on a stack, anything on the stack that has a target, you have to choose a target when you put it on the stack. So what's going to happen when you get in for damage with your ghost? I mean, I'm telling you why this doesn't work, even though it is still a really good pairing. What happens is you connect with your ghost. Of course, your ghost and Francisco will both trigger because they both have damage triggers. You'll choose one to put on the stack first, and it doesn't matter which one you put first. It's not going to work, right? If I put the Francisco ability first and then the ghost after, of course, the ghost will resolve first. I haven't explored yet, right? So again, the thinking that people might have here is I can explore a card into my graveyard and then ghost will put it into my hand. So of course, if you want to do that, or if you want to attempt to do that, it doesn't actually work. What you're going to have to do is put ghost on the stack first, so it resolves last, and then Francisco. However, when I put the ghost ability on the stack, I have to choose a card, right? It is a target. It says choose up to 1 target card in the graveyard. So as soon as I put the Ghost of Ramirez DiPietro ability on the stack, I have to choose a target for it. So it has to be a card that's already in my graveyard. So Francisco hasn't explored yet because, of course, I'm putting it on the stack after. So either way you do it, however you stack the triggers, you cannot get the explored card out of your graveyard is basically what I'm driving at here. However, we will be putting counters on our Francisco and the exploring does work. Obviously, we are still in sort of a graveyard-y theme here, so Francisco does work with the exploring and all of that. Of course, one of the best cards ever, and if you're in a blue-black deck and Ghost is one of your commanders, Auric Lore Mage is an absolute dream. This is something else you can do here with Ghost because, of course, you're searching your library for a card and putting it into your graveyard, which does work with Ghost of Ramirez DiPietro. I mean, this is the best card if you're in a blue-black Ghost deck because this is just tutor for a card. That's it. Just I tutor for a card, I get in for damage with my ghost, and I just put that card in my hand. Whatever I want, I just put it right into my hand. But of course, it also works with a lot of other things we're doing as well. We are doing quite a bit of discarding here. So I got Bone Miser and all of the, discard payoffs as well. We also are having a lot of stuff leave our graveyard. So I have Skeleton Crew and a lot of those effects that want stuff to be leaving our graveyard all the time, right? Whenever one or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 2/2 black skeleton pirate creature token. Hey, it's also a pirate, so it fits that theme as well. So obviously that's a slam dunk here. And since I'm already doing the ghost and the discard and I'm in a blue and black deck, of course I have to throw one of my favorite cards in here, Volra's Shapeshifter. And again, that's why I was actually very close to putting this deck together in paper. I made this deck a while ago. And funny enough, I made my current ghost. Well, actually wasn't a ghost. It was my Dralnu deck, but a blue-black deck. I had that deck, my Persistent Petitioners deck, and this deck, and I was contemplating which one I was going to put together in paper. I was very close to putting this together in paper because it's doing the Volra's Shapeshifter thing, which, again, it works perfectly here because of the discarding with Ghost. It also is a slam dunk with Orc Lore Mage because, again, now I can tutor for any creature in my library and turn my Volra's Shapeshifter into it because it copies the top card of my graveyard if that card is a creature. And of course, it also works with Tortured Existence, which also works with Ghost, right? So Tortured Existence says, play one black, discard a creature card, return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. So with our Volra's Shapeshifter, this just becomes one black mana, turn your Volra's Shapeshifter into whatever you want, and you can keep swapping back and forth, right? Because Volra's Shapeshifter cares about the top card of your library, it's very important to keep cycling through, essentially, whatever the top card of your graveyard is, so I can throw, say, a Phage, the Untouchable, right? And that's why that's in the deck, into my graveyard, and my Volra's Shapeshifter will instantly turn into it. And funny enough, because of the interaction with Ghost, I can get it right back, right? Again, that's why the Tortured Existence works great, because it essentially becomes one black mana, get a creature out of my graveyard, and whenever I just discarded the Tortured Existence, I can just immediately get that back with Ghost. Just a lot of neat interactions with this deck, and again, another chance to throw Volra's Shapeshifter into a deck. Really neat deck here. Again, it's doing the graveyard theme, the discarding, it's doing a lot of different things. Really great deck that, for me, it was close. I almost put this together in paper myself. All right, let's get to something completely different. And this one is very much a Method 1 deck and very much built around this interesting sort of interaction I came up with Abdel Adrian Gorian's Ward. The idea I came up with, maybe someone else has as well. I just thought it was a really, really great fit with Haunted One. So this is a background deck, and it's obviously Orzhov. So Haunted One, 2 and a black, legendary enchantment background, of course, commander, creatures you own have. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, it and other creatures you control that share a creature type with it get +2/+0 and gain Undying until end of turn. And it probably doesn't seem very intuitive to partner this with Abdel Adrian because the Undying, the tapping, none of that seems to work here. And even more so, the tokens you are making, because when this guy enters the battlefield, you exile any number of other non-land permanents until he leaves the battlefield and create a 1/1 white soldier creature token for each permanent exiled this way. So that even the creature type doesn't match because he's a human warrior, which is funny that he's making soldiers even though he's a human warrior. So that part doesn't work. The creature type part doesn't seem to work so well. However, we're using the Haunted One pretty much almost entirely just on our commander. The creature type thing is, it does work here. I mean, for example, King Makar the Gold Cursed just happens to be a human, so that will work on him. Obviously, human and warrior are pretty popular creature types, so we're just going to stumble into it. But of course, King Makar is in the deck because he works with the tapping theme, which of course is going to be more important here, right? I got Springleaf Drum, which you can tap an untapped creature you control to add 1 mana of any color, because being able to tap our commander at instant speed is super important because, of course, we want to give it Undying at instant speed. Now, why this works with Abdel Adrian is because, of course, giving a creature Undying means when it dies, it comes back with a +1/+1 counter on it, but now that it has a +1/+1 counter on it, that's shut off. Abdel Adrian, essentially, and again, this is how most people I would imagine build this commander, it's a blinking commander, right? So that's what we're doing here. And of course, blinking doesn't work with +1/+1 counters very well because when the creature comes back, they're gone. Oh, wait a minute, that's what we want to do here. The blinking works with the Haunted One because every time we blink our commander, it comes back and the +1/+1 counter's gone, so the Undying is now turned on again. That's the idea here. There's I would say a bit of a blinking theme. This certainly isn't a blinking deck, but there definitely is a decent amount of blinking going on in this deck. There also is -1/-1 counters going on in this deck, like Midnight Banshee is a fantastic slam dunk here, because again, the -1/-1 counters and the +1/+1 cancel out. So Midnight Banshee at the beginning of your upkeep will put a -1/-1 counter on each non-black creature, and of course, our commander is non-black. I will point out that our commander making soldiers is just sort of a a whatever. You know, it's like, okay, we get the soldiers, that's fine. We can use them. We do have sack outlets in this deck and stuff that we can use them for, but it's not a huge part of the deck. And of course, I have really neat instant speed tap effects because that's going to be really, really important. So we're going to tap our untapped commander to turn on Haunted One, right? Then we sacrifice our commander to some effect. It, of course, has the Undying, comes back into play. We blink a whole bunch of other creatures, and then we blink our commander to bring all those other things back, and then our commander comes back without the +1/+1 gunner, right? It can be a little convoluted, but I assure you it certainly does work. You know, Field Surgeon, another funny fit. I got a lot of these funny fits in here that can instant speed tap creatures, right? 1 and a white human cleric, tap an untapped creature you control, prevent the next one damage that we've dealt target creature this turn. It's an almost useless ability, but it's just a way to instant speed tap our commander, which is going to be really, really important in this deck. Also, this deck's doing a lot of really interesting interactions with Abdel and the Haunted One Undying. So really interesting deck. All right, and lastly, we're going to end off with a Teneb the Harvester deck. But again, we're back to the method 2 here, where Teneb the Harvester just happened to fit what I was doing. And this deck is a Siege Rhino deck. Obviously, this card is bomb in Standard. It was a bomb in Modern for a while, I think. I don't know if anyone still plays in Modern. It is a great card, but it's obviously a little underwhelming in the Commander format, despite the fact that it's maybe one of the best creatures ever printed, right? So if you haven't seen it before, 1 white, black, and a green Rhino 4/5 with trample, which is, you know, pretty good stats. But when it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. And, you know, again, in 20 card format, obviously that's a pretty decent swing, and Commander not so much. However, it is each opponent that is relevant. And this deck is essentially, again, a sort of a secret Commander deck. And we are doing a little bit of blinking, a little bit of copying, recursion, obviously, which is where we get to the commander, right? So again, I guess funny enough, I am doing a lot of the similar things I'm doing the Abdel deck, where we can sacrifice our Siege Rhino, get it back with Teneb, of course, because when it deals combat damage to a player, we may pay 2 and a black. If you do, put a creature card from your graveyard into play under your control. So that's why I chose Teneb, obviously the right colors as well. But that's why I chose Teneb, because we can do a little bit of recursion with our Siege Rhino. Obviously, we got to get the Siege Rhino, but in these colors, super easy. Obviously, green tutors for creatures really well. And if you wanted to make this deck, you could even put more. I didn't even put that many. You could put more if you wanted to. I also have one of my favorites, Flesh Writher, which is 4 mana value. So, of course, it can go get our Siege Rhino, right? 2 black, black, horror 3/3. Has the entirely unique Transfigure ability. 1 black, black. So I can pay 1 black, black and sacrifice this creature to search my library for a card with the same mana value, which of course is 4. This will go tutor for our Siege Rhino, put it directly into play. And then of course we can start going to town. You'll obviously see a lot of cards that are in here because of the Siege Rhino, like Pine Harmonicon. I mean, this is going to double up the trigger off of our Siege Rhino. Obviously we have other ones, like I got Lorna the Third Path in here. Double up that trigger? Sure, why not? Wood Elves? Double up that trigger, right? So again, I'm building around the Siege Rhino, but this deck can work without getting the Siege Rhino. You know, I mean, obviously you want to get it eventually, but you certainly aren't going to be sitting there waiting for your Siege Rhino to come out. It just is built around the things that Siege Rhino is doing. So again, for example, I have Indulging Patrician in this deck. Why? Because our Siege Rhino gains us 3 life whenever we blink it or whatever. At the beginning of your end step, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, each opponent loses 3 life. So now our opponents are going to lose 6 life. Not too shabby, right? Again, this is how we're going to win. I also got the Gaffer at the beginning of your end step. If you gain 3 or more life this turn, draw a card. So I have a lot of these effects that at the beginning of your end step, if you gain 3 life, because of course our Siege Rhino very easily gains us 3 life. But again, I also have, for example, Cathedral Sanctifier. What the hell's Cathedral Sanctifier? It is a 1 white human cleric 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life. So this is a bit of a stopgap, right? We don't absolutely need our Siege Rhino. We can just play Cathedral Sanctifier. We'll gain the 3 life, and then we'll get the trigger off our, you know, Gaffer, Indulging Patrician, whatever, right? So I do have sort of a little bit of replacements in there as well. Obviously, our Siege Rhino dying, no problem. We can get out of the graveyard easy enough. If our Siege Rhino gets exiled, either from our graveyard or from play, we can pull from Eternity, throw it back in our graveyard, get it back with our commander, or we can Rift Sweeper and shuffle it back into our library, get it back with whatever, Flesh Writher, one of our tutor effects, right? So essentially, this is a Siege Rhino Secret Commander deck. Pretty neat one, I think. There you go. Bunch of deck ideas that I came up with. All the deck lists are in the description below, right? So if you guys are interested at all in any of these ideas, feel free to take them yourself. They're all yours. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.